At a local bakery, a billionaire witnesses a birthday cake order get cancelled because a family can't afford it. The resigned look on a little boy's face and his mother's silent gesture awaken deep memories in the man who thought he had everything. What starts with a denied cake transforms into a story of love, reconnection, and courage in the face of prejudice. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's get right into it. I promise this is going to be the best story you'll ever hear. Saturday morning in New York City was just starting to buzz with its typical weekend energy. The streets of Park Slope, Brooklyn, filling with families enjoying their day off. The September sun streamed through shop windows, illuminating colorful displays and hurried people on the wide sidewalks. Tucked between bakeries, pharmacies, and small shops was a pastry shop that stood out for its charming facade and the unmistakable aroma of fresh bread and chocolate cake wafting from its half-open door. Michael Thompson parked his imported sedan in front of the shop with the ease of a man accustomed to having everything at his fingertips. At 45, he was one of New York's most successful real estate developers, the owner of a firm that put up luxury towers all over the city. His name was synonymous with efficiency and results. Dressed in a light blue dress shirt, tailored slacks, and a Swiss watch worth more than most of the cars parked on the street, Michael walked into the bakery with decisive steps, already typing out the next day's appointments on his phone. He was only there to pick up an order his assistant had placed for an important meeting on Monday. Gourmet, pastries beautifully presented to impress foreign investors. Nothing that would take more than 5 minutes of his time. Michael had a tight schedule, even on weekends, because for him, time was literally money. The bakery was cozy, with light-colored walls decorated with wooden shelves holding glass jars filled with colorful candies and homemade cookies. The glass counter displayed cakes of all sizes and flavors, pies with glossy toppings, and tiny pastries that looked like miniature works of art. 2 employees were behind the counter, one jotting something in a notebook while the other helped a customer. Michael got into this short line just 3 people ahead of him and turned his attention back to his phone. He was replying to an email when he heard a woman's voice, quiet but filled with anguish, coming from the counter. "I need to cancel the order." Michael instinctively looked up. In front of him, a young woman was speaking to the employee. She looked to be in her early 30s, with brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her clothes clean but visibly worn with time. Beside her, a boy of about 6 or 7 clutched her hand tightly, staring at the floor with an expression that seemed far too old for his age. "But Ms. Morales," the employee replied gently, "the cake is almost ready. It's for Lucas's birthday tomorrow, right? We already started on the decoration with the theme you asked for." The woman, Daniela, pressed her lips together, as if holding back a sob that threatened to escape. Her free hand clenched into a fist, her short nails digging into her palm. "I know, Chloe, I know, but something came up. My grandmother had to see a doctor this week. It was an emergency. The money I'd set aside. For the birthday, I had to use it for her tests and medication. I just can't. I'm so sorry." The silence that followed was heavy. The employee glanced at the little boy, who kept his head down, and then back at Daniela. "Are you sure? We could give you a discount, or you could pay later when you can—" "No." Daniela's voice was firm but trembling. "I don't want to owe anyone. Things are hard enough as it is. It's better to just cancel." Michael watched the scene with a strange feeling in his chest. He was used to negotiating multi-million-dollar deals, making decisions that affected hundreds of jobs, and solving complex problems with ease. But something about this simple scene left him frozen. Maybe it was the boy's posture. The kid didn't cry. He didn't throw a tantrum. He didn't beg his mom to reconsider. He just stood there, quiet, accepting the situation with a maturity that shouldn't exist in a child his age. Daniela turned to leave, holding her son's hand firmly. That's when the boy glanced back, just for a second, and his eyes met Michael's. There were no tears in that gaze, but there was something worse. There was resignation, acceptance, the certainty that some things just weren't meant for him. Michael felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Suddenly, he wasn't in the Park Slope bakery anymore. He was 7 years old again, on the outskirts of the Bronx. living in a two-room apartment with his mother and two younger siblings. He remembered the day his mother, Lucy, came back from the grocery store with only half the items they'd planned for. "We didn't have enough money, honey," she had said with the same broken voice Daniela had just used. He remembered how he hadn't cried, how he'd said it was okay that he wasn't even that hungry. He remembered his mother's wounded pride, that silent strength she carried every day as she left before dawn to work cleaning 3 different houses. Michael blinked, returning to the present. Daniela was almost at the bakery door. "Wait!" His own voice surprised him, coming out louder than he'd intended. Daniela turned, confused. The other people in line looked at him too. Michael took 2 steps forward, approaching the woman and her son. Up close, he could see the details more clearly. Daniela's red-rimmed eyes, ACO, signs she had been crying recently. The boy's clothes clean and neatly ironed, but with discreet patches on the knees of his pants. Their worn-out shoes. "Sorry to interrupt," Michael began, feeling strangely awkward. "But I couldn't help but overhear. And I'd like to pay for your son's birthday cake." Daniela's eyes widened, and she took a step back as if she'd been pushed. "What? No, thank you, but no." "Please," Michael insisted, keeping his voice calm. "It's not charity. It's just, I've been in your situation a long time ago and I'd like to do this." "You don't know me." Daniela's voice was louder now, defensive. Her wounded pride was evident in every word. "I don't take handouts from strangers. Thanks for the offer, but no." She turned to leave again, pulling her son by the hand. But the boy looked back one more time, and Michael saw a silent plea in his eyes. Not for the cake, but to see his mother happy, even if just for a moment. "My name is Michael Thompson," he said, louder this time. Daniela stopped but didn't turn around. "I grew up in the Bronx. My mom raised 3 kids on her own, working as a house cleaner. There were times we ate nothing but rice and beans for weeks. I had birthdays that went by without a cake, without anything, because the money ran out before the end of the month." Now Daniela turned slowly. There were tears in her eyes. "I remember seeing my mum crying in the bathroom, trying to hide it," Michael continued, a lump forming in his throat, "because she thought she was a failure for not being able to give us everything we deserved. But she wasn't. She was the strongest person I've ever known, and I'm sure you're just like her." A heavy silence fell over the bakery. The other people in line watched the scene with respectful quiet. Even the employee had stopped what she was doing. "I'm not offering a handout," Michael said, taking another step forward. "I'm offering a chance to do for you what I wish someone had done for my mom back then. To see the smile on your son's face when he blows out the candles on his cake. To not have to carry this weight alone, even if it's just for today." Daniela covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. The boy, Lucas, squeezed her hand and looked at Michael with an expression that mixed fear and hope. "I don't know," Daniela whispered through her fingers. "I don't know if I can accept this." "You can," Michael said firmly, "and I'm not taking no for an answer." Daniela finally lowered her hands, meeting Michael's gaze. An internal battle was raging within her, between her wounded pride and the motherly love that wanted to see her son happy. "It would be a loan," she said finally, her voice shaky but firm. "I'll pay you back. It might take a while, but I'll pay you." Michael nodded, though he had no intention of ever accepting the money back. "Deal." He walked over to the counter, where the employee, Chloe, was watching with teary eyes. "The cake she ordered," Michael said. "Keep the order. And tell me, do you do full party decorations, balloons, pastries, the whole thing?" Chloe blinked, confused. "Yes, we do full packages, but—" "Then I want the full package," Michael interrupted. "Everything needed for a kid's birthday party, the best you have." "Mr. Thompson, no, that's too much," Daniela rushed over. "The cake is more than enough. You don't need to do anything else." Michael turned to her with a gentle smile. "When was the last time you celebrated something, really celebrated, without worrying about money?" Daniela opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came out. Her eyes filled with tears again. "Then let me do this," Michael said softly. "Not out of pity, but because I can, and because some days life just needs a little color you know?" Lucas, who had been silent until now, let go of his mother's hand and took a step toward Michael. His big eyes were fixed on the businessman. "Are you like Superman?" the boy asked in a small voice. The question caught Michael by surprise, and he couldn't hold back a genuine laugh that escaped his lips, the first in a long time. "No, champ. I'm just a regular guy, but I like to help when I can too." Lucas smiled. It was a small, shy smile, but it was real. And that smile stirred something inside Michael's chest in a way he hadn't felt in years. In the following minutes, Michael and Chloe discussed the party details. It would be at Daniela's house, the next day, Sunday. Michael paid for everything up front with his credit card, without batting an eye. When the final total appeared on the screen, Daniela let out a choked sob, but Michael just smiled and said it was all taken care of. "I'll give you my number," Daniela said, still visibly shaken, "and my address for the delivery, and I'll need your number too so I can pay you back." Michael jotted down her information on a napkin Chloe offered and handed Daniela his business card. She stared at the small rectangle of paper with wide eyes, reading his full name and title, CEO of Thompson Development. "You own a development company?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I do," Michael confirmed, not making a big deal of it. "But that doesn't matter right now. What matters is that Lucas is going to have his birthday party." They said their goodbyes at the bakery door. Daniela shook Michael's hand firmly, her red eyes now shining with something he identified as a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you. I swear I'll pay you back." "You don't have to," Michael said sincerely. "Just send me a picture from the party. I want to see his smile." Lucas gave Michael a shy wave before walking away, hand in hand with his mother. Michael stood there on the sidewalk, watching them disappear down the busy street. The woman's steps seemed lighter now, and the boy was looking up at her, chattering excitedly about something. Michael finally went back into the bakery to get his own order, but he found he could barely focus on the employee's instructions about refrigeration and expiration dates. His mind was elsewhere, caught up in the unexpected encounter that had stirred something deep within him. When he got back to his car, Michael didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the street traffic without really seeing it. He thought about his own life, built brick by brick over more than 20 years of relentless work. He had everything money could buy: a massive apartment on the Upper East Side, imported cars, a successful company, investments that earned more in a month than most people made in a year. But when was the last time he had truly felt something? When was the last time one of his actions had meant something beyond profit or loss? His marriage to Patricia had ended 3 years ago, a cold, bureaucratic divorce between two people who could no longer stand each other. She had gotten custody of their daughter, Jenna, who was now 16 and barely spoke to him. The girl blamed him for the divorce, fueled by her mother's venomous words, and preferred to spend weekends with her friends rather than with her father. Michael had money, he had success, he had respect in the business world, but he had no connection, no real affection, no purpose beyond accumulating more and more on a wheel that never stopped spinning. And then, on that ordinary Saturday morning, he had found a mother fighting to give her son a little dignity, and a boy who didn't cry because he had learned far too early that crying didn't change reality. Michael started the car and drove away with a strange feeling in his chest, something between melancholy and hope. He didn't know it yet, but that chance encounter in the Park Slope Bakery had planted a seed that would completely change the course of his life. The next day, Sunday, Michael woke up earlier than usual. He typically spent Sunday mornings answering emails and reviewing reports, but that day he found himself checking his phone every 5 minutes, waiting for a text from Daniela. The message arrived around 2 in the afternoon. It was a photo. Lucas was standing in front of a colorful cake with lit candles forming the number 7. The boy was grinning from ear to ear, his eyes shining with pure happiness. In the background you could see colorful balloons and a small table with pastries. The apartment was simple, the walls peeling here and there, but it was decorated with care. And in the corner of the photo, part of Daniela's face was visible, and she was smiling too. The caption simply read, "Thank you for bringing the joy back to my son. You have no idea what this meant to us." Michael stared at the photo for a long time, then he saved it to his phone and set it as his wallpaper. His employees would find it strange, but he didn't care. That image represented something he had forgotten existed. It represented humanity, real connection, purpose. 3 days later, on Wednesday, Michael was in his office on the 23rd floor of a Park Avenue high-rise when his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered, expecting a client or a supplier. "Hello?" "Hi, Michael." Daniela's voice sounded nervous on the other end. "Sorry to bother you. It's Daniela. We met at the bakery last Saturday." "Daniela?" Michael's voice was genuinely warm, a rarity for him on work calls. "Hi, how are you? I got the picture." Lucas looked ecstatic. Yes, he was so happy. Her voice carried a smile. "The party was perfect. He hasn't stopped talking about you. He said you were his guardian angel." Michael laughed, feeling a warmth in his chest. "He's a special kid." "He is." There was a pause. "Look, I'm calling because, well, I'd like to talk to you about the money and how I'm going to pay you back. I know you said I didn't have to, but it's important to me. Do you have time to grab a coffee? Whenever and wherever works best for you." Michael glanced at his packed schedule on his computer screen. He had meetings nearly every day of the week, business lunches, dinners, with investors. "How about tomorrow? Noon?" he heard himself say, mentally cancelling a lunch with a supplier that could be rescheduled. "Tomorrow's great," Daniela replied, relieved. "Is there a place you prefer?" Michael thought for a moment. He usually frequented expensive restaurants, places where he closed million-dollar deals over lobster. But that wasn't what he wanted now. "Do you know the Corner Cafe in Greenwich Village, near the subway?" "I do." "Then let's meet there at noon." After he hung up, Michael stared at the phone with a smile. His assistant, Jessica, walked in with a stack of documents for him to sign and frowned at her boss's expression. "Mr. Thompson, are you all right? I've never seen you smile like that." Michael blinked, snapping back to reality. "I'm fine, Jessica. Actually, cancel my lunch with Miller tomorrow. Tell him something came up and reschedule for next week." Jessica made a note, though she was visibly curious. "Any important engagement?" Michael looked at the photo of Lucas on his phone, still open on the screen. "Yes," he said sincerely. "The most important one I've had in a very long time." The Corner Cafe was one of those places that resisted time and the relentless modernization of New York City. It sat on a tree-lined corner in Greenwich Village, with small wooden tables scattered on the sidewalk and a faded red awning that shielded customers from the strong October sun. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with grilled cheese wafted invitingly from the open door. Michael arrived 10 minutes early, unusual for him, as he typically scheduled his time down to the minute to avoid waste. He chose a table outside, under a tree that offered generous shade, and ordered a black coffee while he waited. He was nervous, he realized, with surprise. More nervous than he got before presentations to major investors. His fingers drummed on the wooden table, and he caught himself checking his phone every few seconds, even though he knew it was still minutes before their meeting time. Daniela showed up exactly at noon, walking briskly down the sidewalk. She wore a light blue blouse and simple jeans, her hair down and falling over her shoulders this time. She carried a large canvas tote bag and seemed to have taken care in getting ready for their meeting. When her eyes met Michael's, she smiled, but it was a nervous smile, the kind from someone who wasn't sure what to expect. Michael stood to greet her, and for a second they both hesitated, unsure whether to shake hands or hug. They ended up with an awkward greeting that turned into a formal handshake, followed by embarrassed laughter. "Hi," Daniela said, sitting in the chair Michael pulled out for her. "Sorry if I'm nervous. It's not every day you have coffee with a major CEO." "Please, don't treat me like a major CEO," Michael requested, sitting down as well. "Today I'm just Michael, and you can relax. There's no need to be nervous." A waiter came over, and Daniela ordered a cappuccino and a cheese Danish. Michael noticed she chose the cheapest items on the menu, and felt a pang in his chest. He knew that gesture, recognized the silent math that people with little money automatically do when looking at a menu, mentally adding up each item and cutting anything that wasn't essential. "Order whatever you want," he said gently. "It's on me." "No, I'll pay for my own," Daniela replied quickly, defensively. "I already owe you. I don't want to owe you more." Michael sighed, but didn't. Push it. He was beginning to understand that Daniela's pride was something to be respected, not challenged. When the waiter left, an uncomfortable silence hung between them. Daniela fidgeted with her hands, and Michael searched for the right words to break the ice. "How's Lucas?" he finally asked. Daniela's face lit up instantly. "He won't stop talking about you. Just yesterday he asked me if the good man was going to come back. That's the nickname he gave you, the good man." Michael smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. "He's an incredible kid. His maturity that day when you had to cancel the cake, that really stuck with me." "He had to grow up too fast," Daniela said, her voice tinged with a deep sadness. "He had to learn to deal with disappointment way too early. It's not how it should be, but it's the reality we have." The waiter brought their orders and they thanked him. Daniela held the cappuccino cup between her hands as if seeking warmth from it, even though the day was warm. "Michael," she began, taking a deep breath, "I wanted to talk about the money for the party. I've set some aside here." She started to open her bag, but Michael reached out, lightly touching her arm to stop her. "Daniela, no, I don't want the money back. But I have to pay you," she insisted, her eyes shining with determination. "I don't accept charity." "It's not charity," Michael said, his tone calm but firm. "It was a gift, for Lucas. And you're not going to offend me by returning a gift, are you?" Daniela bit her lip, clearly conflicted. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her cup. "Then at least let me get to know you better," she said finally. "Let me understand who the person is who did this for us, because I need to know I'm not indebted to someone who's going to collect in some other way." The sentence came out with a harshness Michael hadn't expected, but he understood completely. Daniela had every right to be cautious. She didn't know him from anywhere, and rich people doing favors for poor people usually came with some kind of strings attached. "Ask me anything you want," Michael said. "I have nothing to hide." Daniela studied him for a long moment, as if reading between the lines on his face, searching for any sign of insincerity. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Really, don't give me that nice story about a tough childhood. I want to know what really motivated you." Michael took a deep breath. No one asked him questions like this. No one questioned his motives. In his world, people accepted his gestures at face value, either because they had no choice or because they didn't care enough to ask. "Because I saw my past in that bakery," he began slowly. "I saw my mother in your face. I saw the child I used to be in Lucas's eyes. And I realized that in over 20 years of climbing the ladder, I had never done anything that truly mattered. I built buildings, made money, earned respect. But I never changed anyone's life. I never looked at a person and thought, I can make a difference here." He paused, idly stirring the sugar he hadn't put in his coffee. "My life is empty, Daniela. I have everything and nothing at the same time. I have a huge apartment where I live alone. I have a daughter who barely speaks to me. I have friends who only call when they need something. And when I saw the two of you there, it was like something inside me woke up. It was like I remembered there's more to life than financial statements and board meetings." Daniela watched him in silence, and Michael couldn't decipher her expression. "So it was selfish in the end," he concluded. "I didn't do it just for you, I did it for me too, because I needed to feel like I was still human, that I still had a heart under this expensive suit and this ridiculous watch that's worth more than it should be." The silence that followed was long, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes when someone is processing honest words, weighing their truth. "Thank you for being honest," Daniela said finally, "because I'm going to be honest with you too. When we left that bakery, I was scared. I was afraid you'd show up demanding something, that you were one of those rich men who think they can buy people, that you would try to, I don't know, use me in some way." Michael felt a pang of pain hearing that, but he couldn't blame. her for her suspicion. "I understand," he said, "and you had every right to think that, but I swear to you, Daniela, I have no ulterior motives. I just wanted to do something good. That's all." Daniela nodded slowly, and some of the tension in her shoulders seemed to melt away. "So tell me more about you," she requested, sounding more relaxed now. "You said you grew up in the Bronx. How did you get to where you are today?" And there, at that small cafe table in Greenwich Village, with the sound of traffic in the background and people rushing by on the sidewalk, Michael began to tell his story. He spoke of his poor childhood in the Bronx, of his mother who worked non-stop, of how he studied by candlelight when the power was out because they couldn't afford the bill. He talked about winning a scholarship to a private school where he was humiliated by his wealthy classmates for wearing old clothes and having no money for lunch. He told her how that humiliation had changed him, how he decided he would never be poor again, never be embarrassed again, never be less than anyone else. He studied like a madman, got into civil engineering at NYU, worked on construction sites during the day and studied at night. He started as an intern at a small construction firm, was promoted to engineer, then manager, then director. At 32, with a mix of a bank loan, hard work and a bit of luck, he started his own company. And it worked, Michael concluded. It worked out very well. In 10 years, Thompson Development became one of the biggest firms in the city. I had everything I'd ever dreamed of, or so I thought. "And your marriage?" Daniela asked, gently. Michael sighed, taking a sip of his now lukewarm coffee. "I met Patricia in college. She came from a wealthy family. She was everything I wasn't. I think at the time I thought marrying her was the final confirmation that I had made it, you know? That the poor kid from the Bronx was now married to a high society girl." He laughed humorlessly. "But the truth is, it never really worked. We were too different. She wanted a life of appearances, fancy dinners, expensive trips, pretty pictures to post on social media, and I just wanted to work, because I was still afraid of losing everything. When Jenna was born, I thought it would bring us together, but it only made things worse. I was always working, never home, and Patricia resented me for it. Rightfully so, I admit." "When did you get divorced?" 3 years ago. It was cold, bureaucratic. We divided the assets. She got custody of Jenna, and that was it. It was over. 17 years of marriage ended with signatures on paper." "And your daughter?" The pain on Michael's face was visible. "Jenna is 16 now. She doesn't talk to me. Patricia has spent the last 3 years poisoning her mind, telling her that her father chose work over family, that I'm a cold, calculating man. And maybe she's right. I've tried to reconnect, but Jenna has blocked me on everything. She doesn't answer my calls, doesn't reply to my texts. To her, I don't exist anymore." Daniela reached across the table, lightly touching Michael's hand in a gesture of comfort. It was a simple touch, but it meant a lot. "I'm so sorry," she said sincerely. "It's the price you pay, I guess," Michael replied, looking at her hand. On his. "When you become obsessed with proving you're somebody, you forget to actually be somebody." They were silent for a moment, and then Daniela withdrew her hand, as if just now realizing the gesture she had made. "What about you?" Michael asked, breaking the silence. "Tell me about you. I want to hear your story too." Daniela took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep water. "There's not much to tell," she began. "My story is much simpler than yours. I lost my parents in a car accident when I was 12. I was raised by my grandmother, Frances. She gave me everything she could, which wasn't much in material terms, but it was a lot in terms of love." Her voice softened as she spoke of her grandmother, filled with affection. "She always worked as a seamstress, making clothes to order. We were never rich, but we never faced extreme hardship either, until I met Lucas's father." The shift in her tone was clear. The affection gave way to something harder. "I was 24. He was handsome, charming, said all the right things. My grandmother didn't like him from the start, said there was something off about him, but I didn't listen. I thought she was being overprotective, that it was just a grandmother's jealousy. I got involved, and I got pregnant with Lucas." She paused, fiddling with the paper napkin on the table. "When I told him about the pregnancy, he disappeared, literally, blocked my number, moved out of the apartment he shared with friends, deleted all his social media. I never saw or heard from him again. Lucas doesn't even know his father's name, and I prefer it that way." "So you raised him alone," Michael said, more a statement than a question. "Me and my grandmother. She was 65 when Lucas was born, but she helped with everything. She'd watch him while I worked. She's the one who picks him up from school to this day, because I don't get off work until 6. "And where do you work?" "I'm a cashier at the Key Food near our apartment. I work from 9 to 6, Monday through Saturday. I make a little over minimum wage. I pay rent on a small 2-bedroom apartment for me, Lucas, and my grandmother. There's not much left at the end of the month, but we get by." She smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Or rather, we were getting by, until my grandmother got sick. She has diabetes and high blood pressure, but about 6 months ago, other problems started. Her heart is weak. She needs expensive medications, frequent tests. Medicaid helps, but there are things we have to pay for, and that's why I couldn't afford Lucas's birthday party this time." Michael felt a weight in his chest hearing all of this. Daniela spoke about everything with a calmness that came from resignation, from someone used to fighting against the current and never getting a break. "You're incredible," he said suddenly. Daniela blinked, surprised. "What?" You're incredible. The strength you have, the way you take care of everyone, how you never give up. It's admirable, far more than anything I've ever done in my life." Daniela blushed, clearly unsure how to react to the compliment. "I just do what needs to be done," she murmured. "No, you do so much more than that," Michael insisted. "And Lucas is lucky to have you as his mother." The rest of their meeting flowed naturally. They talked about trivial things, about life in New York, about the heat. Michael told funny stories about construction projects gone wrong, and Daniela laughed genuinely, a beautiful sound that made Michael want to hear it more often. She told him about some unusual situations at the supermarket, crazy customers, and embarrassing moments at the register. When they finally looked at the clock, it was almost 3 in the afternoon. 3 hours had flown by, and neither of them seemed to have noticed. "I have to go," Daniela said reluctantly. "I need to pick up Lucas from a neighbor who watches him after school." "Of course," Michael said, signaling the waiter. "For the check." When the bill came, Daniela insisted on paying her share, and this time Michael didn't argue. He respected her gesture. They left the cafe together, walking slowly to the corner where Daniela would catch the bus. "Michael," she said, stopping before crossing the street, "thank you. For today. For listening to me. For sharing your story. It was good to get to know you better." "For me too," he replied sincerely. "We should do this again. If you want to, of course. No strings, no pressure, just to talk." Daniela smiled, and this time it was a genuine, nerveless smile. "I'd like that." They exchanged phone numbers, and Daniela crossed the street to catch the bus that had just pulled up to the stop. Before getting on, she waved to Michael, who waved back. Michael stood on the corner for a few more minutes, watching the bus pull away into the heavy Greenwich Village traffic. Something had changed in him over the past few hours, something fundamental. He had had a real conversation with someone. He had shared things he never talked about. He had allowed himself to be vulnerable, and he hadn't been judged for it. He went back to the office that afternoon but couldn't concentrate on anything. Jessica noticed the change in her boss's mood, but said nothing. She just watched, curious, as he sat through meetings with a half smile on his face and checked his phone more often than usual. That night, before going to sleep, Michael sent a text to Daniela. "Just got home. Thanks for this afternoon. It was one of the best conversations I've had in years." The reply came a few minutes later. "For me too. Good night, Michael, and thank you for everything." Michael slept better that night than he had in months. The following days brought an unexpected new routine. Michael and Daniela started texting daily. It began with simple things. "Good morning, good night, how was your day?" It then evolved into longer conversations about everything and nothing. She would send pictures of Lucas doing his homework, and Michael would send pictures of the view from his Park Avenue office. He told her about difficult meetings, and she told him about rude customers at the supermarket. 2 weeks after their first coffee, they met again, and then again, and again, always in simple places, neighborhood cafes, parks, an ice cream shop. Michael would insist on paying, and Daniela would insist on splitting. They reached a compromise. They would take turns paying, but they always chose inexpensive places so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. It was during one of these meetings, 3 weeks after their first coffee, that Michael met Lucas and Francis in person. Daniela invited him for Sunday lunch at her apartment, and he accepted without a second thought, cancelling a prior engagement. The family's apartment was small, just as Daniela had described. It was on the second floor of a walk-up building in Queens. 2 bedrooms, a tiny living room that connected to the kitchen, 1 bathroom. The paint was peeling in some spots, the floor was old polished concrete, but everything was impeccably clean and organized. There were flower pots on the windowsills, framed photos on the wall, a worn but comfortable sofa. It was a real home, Michael realized. More of a home than his 3,000-square-foot apartment on the Upper East Side would ever be. Lucas greeted him with a shy but warm hug, already recognizing him as the man who had saved his birthday. Frances, a short woman in her 70s, with white hair in a bun and piercing eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances, greeted him politely but cautiously. The lunch was simple but delicious: rice, beans, roasted chicken, salad, homemade food made with love. Michael had 2 helpings, genuinely complimenting Frances's cooking, which made her warm up to him a little, her gaze less suspicious. After lunch, while Daniela and her grandmother did the dishes, Michael stayed in the living room playing with Lucas. The boy showed him his toys, most of them old and patched up, but each with a story he told with enthusiasm. There was a remote control car that no longer worked, but Lucas pushed it around making engine noises. There were superhero figures bought at a dollar store, but in the boy's imagination, they saved the world every day. "Are you coming back?" Lucas asked suddenly, in the middle of a game. Michael paused, surprised by the direct question. "Do you want me to come back?" Lucas nodded vigorously, his big eyes fixed on him. "Yeah, you're nice. And Mommy smiles more when you're around." Those words hit Michael hard. He glanced toward the kitchen where Daniela was talking quietly with her grandmother while drying dishes. She was laughing at something Francis had said, and she did seem lighter than the first day they met. "I'll come back," Michael promised the boy, "whenever your mum lets me." "Awesome!" Lucas cheered, going back to pushing his car across the floor. As he was leaving later that afternoon, Francis pulled him aside in the hallway, out of earshot of Daniela and Lucas. "Mister," she said in a raspy voice, the kind from someone who had smoked for years before quitting, "I don't know what your intentions are with my granddaughter, but I'll tell you one thing. She's suffered enough. She's been abandoned once before. If you're just here passing the time playing some bored rich man's game, you'd better disappear now before you hurt her and the boy." Michael looked at her, seeing the strength in this small but formidable woman. "Francis," he said with all the sincerity he could muster, "I don't know exactly what I'm doing here. I don't know where this is going. But I swear to you I have no intention of hurting your granddaughter or your great-grandson. All I know is that for the first time in a long time I feel connected to someone. I feel human again." Frances studied him for a long moment, her piercing eyes seeming to read his soul. "All right," she finally said. "You seem sincere, but if you hurt my girl, you'll have to answer to me, and I may be old and sick, but I still know how to be a snake when I need to be." Michael couldn't help but smile. "Yes, ma'am. Understood." In the days that followed, Michael became a part of the small family's routine. He would pick Lucas up from school a few times a week, take the boy to the park to play catch and help with his homework. He drove Francis to doctor's appointments when Daniela couldn't miss work. He started showing up for dinner on Sundays. Gradually, almost without realizing it, he began to fill a space in that family that hadn't existed before. And so, naturally and inevitably, a month and a half after that first meeting at the cafe, Michael had an idea. Michael was in his office, reviewing contracts for a new development downtown, when the idea finally took full shape in his mind. He had spent the last few weeks observing Daniela, the way she interacted with people, how she solved problems with calm and empathy, how she managed to make Lucas feel loved even in the most difficult circumstances. There was something about her that went beyond mere survival. She had a genuine ability to connect with people, to understand them, to make them feel important, and Thompson Development was in desperate need of someone like that. In recent months, the company had faced a few image crises: complaints from dissatisfied clients, issues with post-sale customer service, a general feeling that the firm had become too big and impersonal. Michael had hired expensive consultants who proposed elaborate rebranding plans, but nothing seemed to address the core problem. The company had lost its human touch. It had become an efficient but cold machine. What it needed was someone who understood people, someone who knew how to listen, who had real empathy, not the artificial corporate empathy learned in seminars, and Daniela had that naturally. Michael picked up the phone and called the Human Resources Department. "Jessica," he said when his assistant answered, "I need you to schedule a meeting with the HR team for tomorrow morning, first thing, and cancel whatever I have. At 10, I'm going to need a free hour." When he hung up, he stared out the panoramic office window at the city of New York, stretching in every direction. He was nervous, he realized, not about the HR meeting, but about the conversation he was going to have with Daniela. He knew he had to be careful, that he couldn't make it seem like he was offering the job out of pity or some sense of obligation. He had to make her understand that it was a genuine offer based on real skills she possessed. That evening he invited Daniela to dinner, not at an expensive restaurant this time, but at a simple pizzeria she had mentioned she liked. She arrived wearing a simple floral dress, her hair down and falling over her shoulders, and Michael felt something stir in his chest at the sight of her. Over the past 2 months, he had grown accustomed to her presence, her smile, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about Lucas or her grandmother. He had grown accustomed to the feeling of having someone to really talk to, someone who saw him beyond his bank account and his important last name. "Something's different about you today," Daniela observed after they ordered their pizza. "You're nervous. Did something happen?" Michael laughed, always surprised by her ability to read people. "Nothing bad happened, but I have a proposal for you, and I'm afraid of how you'll react." Daniela frowned, concerned. "You can tell me." Michael took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Over the last 2 months, I've had the chance to get to know you better, to see how you handle people, how you solve problems, how you have this natural ability to make people feel heard and important. And I've realized that my company desperately needs someone with those skills." He paused, watching the growing confusion on Daniela's face. "I want to offer you a job at Thompson Development as a client relations coordinator. You'd be responsible for managing complaints, improving our customer service, creating post-sale programs. It's a new position I'm creating, and I believe you would be perfect for it." Daniela was silent for a long moment, just looking at him with an expression Michael couldn't decipher. "I'm not qualified for that," she finally said, her voice low. "I'm a supermarket cashier, Michael. I don't have a college degree. I don't have experience in a big company." "You have something better than a degree," Michael countered. "You have real-life experience. You know what it's like to struggle. You know how to deal with hardship. You know what ordinary people need and want. You can't learn that in college." "But, Daniela," he interrupted gently, "I'm not offering this out of pity. I'm not doing you a favor. I need someone like this in my company, someone to humanize us, to remind us that we're dealing with real people, not numbers on a contract. And you have that ability." Daniela bit her lip, clearly conflicted. "What would the salary be?" Michael mentioned a figure that was 4 times what she earned at the supermarket. Daniela's eyes widened. "That's a lot," she whispered. Michael, I can't accept this. People will think that what? That you're with me for my money? That I'm buying you?" Michael's voice was sharper than he intended. "Daniela, I don't care what people think. And you shouldn't either. This is a professional offer based on merit, period. Daniela looked down, her hands trembling slightly on the table. I need to think about it, she said. Of course, take all the time you need. The pizza arrived, but neither of them had much of an appetite. They ate in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When Michael dropped her off at home later, she kissed his cheek in a quick gesture before getting out of the car, and he sat there for a long time, his hand touching the spot where her lips had been. 3 days later, Daniela called. I accept, she said, on one condition. If I'm not good enough, if I can't do the job right, you fire me. No pity, no favors, promise? I promise, Michael said, though he knew he would never do that. When can you start? I need to give 2 weeks' notice at the supermarket. After that, I'm free. 2 weeks later, Daniela started working at Thompson Development. Michael introduced her to the team, made it clear that she had his full confidence, and gave her the freedom to implement the changes she saw fit. And to everyone's surprise but his, she was brilliant. She created a more human feedback system, implemented personal visits to dissatisfied clients, and trained the customer service team to be more empathetic. Within a month, complaints had dropped by half, but with professional success came an inevitable closeness. Daniela worked a few floors below Michael's office, but they saw each other every day. Coffee together in the morning. Lunches where they discussed projects but ended up talking about life. Late afternoons when the office was empty and they would stay behind, talking about everything and nothing. It was on one of those afternoons, 3 months after Daniela started at the company, that everything changed. They were in Michael's office, sitting on the sofa near the window, reviewing customer satisfaction reports that had improved considerably. The sunset light streamed through the window, painting everything in gold. Daniela was laughing at something Michael had said, and in the middle of her laugh, their eyes met, and they stayed there, locked on each other for a moment that seemed to stretch into infinity. Michael couldn't say who moved first. He only knew that suddenly he was closer to her, and she was closer to him, and then their lips met in a kiss that started gently but quickly deepened, charged with 2 months of accumulated tension, of unspoken feelings, of a connection they had both tried to deny, but that had always been there. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. Daniela rested her forehead against his, her eyes closed. This complicates everything, she whispered. I know, Michael replied, caressing her face, but I can't bring myself to regret it. Me neither. They stayed there for a while longer, just absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. It wasn't just a kiss. It was the confirmation of something that had been growing for months. It was turning a deep connection into something even deeper. What do we do now? Daniela asked, finally opening her eyes. I think we stop pretending this is just a friendship, Michael said with a half smile. I think we own up to what we're feeling. People will talk, she warned. Your partners, your clients, your friends. They'll say I'm a gold digger, that you're having a midlife crisis, that this is ridiculous. Let them talk, Michael said, with a determination that surprised even himself. I don't care anymore. But he should have cared. Because people did talk, a lot. The news that the CEO of Thompson Development was dating an employee who used to be a supermarket cashier spread like wildfire through New York high society. It started as gossip at business dinners, evolved into malicious comments in WhatsApp groups, and eventually reached social media and even the gossip columns. Billionaire developer ditches socialite wife for ex-cashier, one sensational headline read. Michael Thompson in relationship with employee 13 years his junior, said another, insinuating all sorts of things. The comments on social media were cruel. They called Daniela a gold digger, an opportunist, a user. They said she had planned it all from the beginning, that the story of the cancelled cake was an elaborate scheme to snag a rich man. They speculated about her true intentions, about how long it would be before she got what she wanted and left. Daniela read the comments at night, alone in her room, and cried silently so as not to wake Lucas. The words hurt deeply because they touched on her greatest fears. What if people were right? What if she really was just an opportunist, even subconsciously? What if she was damaging Michael with her presence? But the worst was yet to come. Patricia, Michael's ex-wife, used the situation to push Jenna even further away from her father. She showed her daughter the headlines, highlighted the cruelest comments, and painted Daniela as a villain who had seduced her father. Jenna, already distant from her father for years, saw it as the final confirmation that he was no good. She called Michael only once, and it was to tell him what she thought. "You're pathetic, Dad," she said, her voice filled with a mix of teenage contempt and real hurt. "You cheated on Mum for years with your work, and now you're parading around the city with some nobody who just wants your money. Have you no shame?" "Jenna, it's not like that." Michael tried to argue, but she cut him off. "Don't call me anymore. Don't text me. Don't show up. I want nothing to do with you." And she hung up. Michael held the phone for a long time after that, feeling as if he'd been punched in the gut. The pain of being rejected by his own daughter was something he wasn't prepared for. He had lost many things in his life, but losing his daughter's love was the worst of all. Daniela noticed the change in him. Michael became quieter, more withdrawn. He was still affectionate with her, still treated her well, but there was a shadow in his eyes that hadn't been there before. One night, 2 weeks after Jenna's call, Daniela went to Michael's apartment. She had never been there before, having resisted for months, but that night she felt she had to go. She found him sitting on the enormous living room sofa, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring down at the city through the floor-to-ceiling window. "Michael," she called softly, sitting beside him. He looked at her, and Daniela saw tears in his eyes. Tears he was holding back with all his might, but that threatened to spill over. "I lost her," he said, his voice hoarse. "I lost my daughter, and it's my fault, because of all the wrong choices I made." Daniela took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "It's not your fault. It was her choice, influenced by her mother. But one day she'll understand. One day she'll see the truth." "What if she doesn't? What if I've lost her forever?" Daniela had no answer for that. She could only offer her presence, her support, her love, and that night she did. Just that, staying by his side as he finally let the tears fall, releasing a pain that had been bottled up for years. But Michael's pain wasn't the only one. Daniela was suffering too. The malicious comments on social media continued, and some people at the company started treating her differently. Not openly hostile, but there were sideways glances, whispers that stopped when she approached, a general sense that she didn't belong. Moreover, she felt she was the cause of Michael's problems. If it weren't for her, he wouldn't have lost his daughter. If it weren't for her, he wouldn't be ridiculed in the social circles he frequented. If it weren't for her, his life would be simpler. It was on a Saturday morning, 4 months after they started their relationship, that Daniela made a decision. She went to Michael's apartment and found him making coffee in the kitchen, wearing shorts and a t-shirt, his hair disheveled, looking younger and more relaxed than ever. He smiled when he saw her, that open, genuine smile that was reserved only for her. But the smile faded when he saw the expression on her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, walking toward her. Daniela took a deep breath, preparing to say the hardest words of her life. "I think we should take a break," she said, her voice trembling. "Or maybe even break up, I don't know." Michael froze. "What? Why?" "Because I'm hurting you," Daniela said, as tears began to fall. "Because you lost your daughter because of me. Because people look at you differently now. Because your reputation is being destroyed. Because I'm a burden in your life." "That's not true." "It is." She raised her voice, the pain spilling out. "You know it is. I've read the comments, Michael. I hear the whispers. I see how people treat you differently now, and I can't stand being the reason for your unhappiness anymore." Michael took 2 steps and pulled her into a tight hug, even as she tried to resist. "Do you hear what you're saying?" he said into her hair. "You're not the reason for my unhappiness. You're the reason for my happiness. This is the first time in years I've felt truly alive, that I feel like my life has meaning beyond work and money." "But your daughter—" "My daughter was already lost to me before you came along," Michael interrupted, holding Daniela's face between his hands and forcing her to look into his eyes. The problem between me and Jenna is years old. It didn't start with you. And if I have to choose between living a lie to please people who never really cared about me, or living my truth with you, I choose you. Every single day I choose you. The people, to hell with what people think, Michael said vehemently. For years, I lived to please everyone. I lived to prove I was somebody, that I deserved respect, that I had value. I built an entire life based on what others thought of me. And you know what I got? A failed marriage, a daughter who hates me, and a loneliness that was killing me from the inside. Until you showed up. He wiped the tears from her face with his thumbs. You saved me, Daniela. You reminded me of what's truly important. You reminded me of where I came from, of who I really am. And I'm not going to let you walk away just because a bunch of shallow, prejudiced people can't see what I see in you. Daniela sobbed, resting her forehead against his. I'm scared, she confessed. Scared that you'll regret this. Scared that one day you'll wake up and realize you made the wrong choice. Never, Michael promised. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You, Lucas, Francis, you're my family now. And I don't give up on my family. They stood there, holding each other for a long time, until Daniela finally calmed down. But even after that conversation, she knew things couldn't go on as they were. Something had to change, and it did. 3 days later, Michael called a press conference. He didn't tell Daniela what he was planning, because he knew she would try to stop him. But he had made a decision, and he wasn't going back. The press conference was scheduled for 10 in the morning on a Tuesday in the auditorium of Thompson Development. Journalists from various outlets attended, curious about what the billionaire developer had to say. Michael walked onto the stage in an impeccable suit, but without a tie, his expression serious but determined. Cameras started flashing, illuminating the room. Good morning, everyone, he began, his firm voice echoing through the auditorium. I've called this conference because I need to clarify a few things that are being said about me and about someone I love very much. He paused, taking a deep breath. My name is Michael Thompson. I'm a businessman, a father, and a man who has made many mistakes in his life. But meeting Daniela Morales was not one of them. He began to tell the story from the beginning. The meeting in the bakery, the little boy who accepted disappointment with a maturity he shouldn't have possessed, the mother who worked hard to provide for her son, the decision to help. He spoke about how that encounter had changed him, how it had awakened something inside him that had been dormant for years. I was born poor, Michael continued, and many journalists' eyes widened at the revelation. I grew up in the Bronx. My mother was a house cleaner. We had nothing but love and a lot of struggle, and it was that love and that struggle that brought me here. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I forgot where I came from. I forgot what really matters. He paused again, his voice growing more emotional. Daniela reminded me. She reminded me that true wealth isn't in the towers I build or the money I make. It's in the connections we form, the lives we touch, the love we give and receive. And yes, we are together. And yes, I love her. Deeply. A murmur went through the auditorium. And for those who think she's with me for my money, you couldn't be more wrong. Daniela was reluctant to accept my help from day one. She tried to pay me back for the cake I bought her son. She hesitated to accept the job I offered because she was afraid of how people would see it. And to this day she pays her own bills, insists on splitting expenses, and has never asked me for a single dime. Michael's voice grew firmer, more defiant. The problem isn't that she comes from a humble background. The problem is your prejudice. The problem is a society that still believes a person's worth is tied to their bank account, their last name, the neighborhood they live in. Daniela Morales is one of the strongest, most principled, and most extraordinary people I have ever met. And she has more value in her little finger than many of the people who frequent the same places I do. He looked directly into the cameras. I will not apologize for loving her. I will not hide my relationship. I will not pretend I don't feel what I feel to please people who judge without knowing. And if that means losing clients, losing contracts, losing the respect of high society, then so be it. Because for the first time in years, I'm being true to myself." The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Michael finished his statement, his hands trembling slightly, but his heart felt lighter than it had in months. He had spoken his truth to the world, unfiltered, without hiding, and now there was no turning back. "Thank you for your time," he said, and walked off the stage without answering any of the dozens of questions the journalists were shouting. Daniela was in her office 3 floors below when she got a call from a colleague about the press conference. With shaking hands, she opened a news website on her computer and watched the live stream that was still up. She heard every word Michael said, saw the determination in his eyes, the way he defended her, in front of everyone. When the video ended, Daniela covered her face with her hands and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness or shame. They were tears of relief, of love, of gratitude for having found someone who loved her enough to face the entire world for her. She grabbed her bag and ran out of her office, taking the stairs 2 at a time until she reached Michael's floor. The assistant tried to tell her he was busy, but Daniela ignored her and pushed open his office door. Michael was standing by the window, still processing what he had just done. When he heard the door open and saw Daniela standing in the doorway, her eyes red and her face wet with tears, he crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. "You're crazy," she said against his chest between sobs. "Completely crazy." "I know," he replied, holding her tighter. "Why did you do that? Why did you expose yourself like that? What if you lose everything?" Michael gently pulled back so he could look into her eyes. "Then I lose it. But I don't lose you, and that's all that matters." Daniela kissed him right there in his office, not caring if anyone could see through the glass walls. It was a kiss full of love, gratitude, and a promise that they would be together no matter what came next. In the following days, Michael's press conference went viral. The video was shared thousands of times on social media, discussed on television shows, and debated in opinion columns. And to the surprise of many, including Michael himself, the overwhelming reaction was positive. Thousands of people commented in support of the couple, sharing their own stories of unlikely love, of facing prejudice, of the courage to live their truth. Celebrities spoke out in their favor, praising Michael's bravery in challenging the norms of high society. Even some clients and business partners contacted him to express their admiration. Of course, there were still negative comments, still people who disapproved, but the voice of their supporters was much louder. And for the first time, Daniela felt she could breathe without fear of judgment. But the best reaction of all came from an unexpected place. 3 days after the press conference, Michael's phone rang late at night. He was at Daniela's apartment, helping Lucas with a science project for school when he saw the name on the screen. Jenna. His heart leaped. He looked at Daniela, who gave him an encouraging nod, and he answered. "Hello?" "Hi, Dad." Jenna's voice was small, hesitant. "Do you have a minute to talk?" Michael stepped out onto the small balcony, closing the door for privacy. "I always have time for you, honey." There was a long pause on the other end. "I saw your press conference," Jenna finally said. "I saw you talking about Daniela, about Lucas, about how they changed you. And Dad, I didn't know. I didn't know you grew up in the Bronx, that Grandma was a cleaner. Mom never told me that." "Your mother doesn't like to talk about that time," Michael said calmly. "She always thought it was something to be hidden, not celebrated." "But you didn't hide it. You talked about it openly in front of everyone, and you said something that stuck with me." Jenna paused. "You said you had lost your daughter, and that it was your fault, because of the wrong choices you made." Michael felt a lump in his throat. "And it's true, I was an absent father. Jenna, I worked so hard to give you everything materially that I forgot to give you what really mattered. My presence, my time, my love. I was so angry at you," Jenna confessed, her voice starting to tremble. "So angry that you left, that you chose work, for everything. And Mom fed that anger. She always painted you as the villain. But when I saw you speaking in that video, I saw a person I didn't know. I saw a man who was being honest, vulnerable, real. And I realized that maybe I never really gave you a chance." Tears started streaming down Michael's face. "Jenna, I'm not saying everything's okay," she quickly added. "I'm not saying I've forgotten everything, but I think I want to get to know the real you. Not the important CEO, not the villain Mom painted, but the real you, if you want to, of course." "I do," Michael said immediately, his voice thick with emotion. "Of course I do, more than anything. So, maybe we could meet, get coffee or something. No pressure, no big expectations, just talk. Whenever you want, wherever you want." They made a plan to meet the following Saturday at a coffee shop Jenna liked. When he hung up, Michael stood on the balcony for a long moment, looking up at the New York night sky, barely able to believe what had just happened. When he went back inside, Daniela was waiting with an anxious expression. "It was Jenna," he said, and a huge smile spread across his face. "She wants to see me. She wants to talk." Daniela covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes shining with joy. "Michael, that's wonderful." Lucas, who was drawing at the living room table, looked up. "Who's Jenna?" "She's my daughter," Michael explained, crouching down beside the boy. She'd be your stepsister if things get official between me and your mom." Lucas thought for a moment, processing the information with his characteristic seriousness. "Is she nice?" "I think so," Michael answered with a smile. "But I haven't seen her in a long time. I'll find out on Saturday." The meeting with Jenna was both emotional and difficult. The 16-year-old girl was a strange mix of the child Michael remembered and a young woman he didn't know. They talked for hours that first day, and Michael listened more than he spoke, letting her express all her accumulated hurt, all her frustrations, all her repressed feelings. It wasn't an instant reconciliation. Jenna still had a lot of anger, many unresolved issues, but it was a start, and over the following months they met regularly. Michael got to know her for the first time, really know her tastes, her dreams, her fears, and slowly, very slowly, the bridge between them began to be rebuilt. Daniela was crucial in this process. She never tried to take the place of Jenna's mother, never forced a closeness, but she was always there, a gentle and welcoming presence. And over time, Jenna began to see her not as a rival or an intruder, but as someone who genuinely loved her father and wanted what was best for him. The turning point came 6 months after that first phone call, when Jenna met Lucas. Michael had invited his daughter for Sunday lunch at Daniela's, and though nervous, she accepted. Lucas was fascinated by his older sister from the first moment. He showed her his toys, told her stories from school, and asked her a million questions about her life. Jenna, who had arrived tense and defensive, relaxed in the face of the boy's infectious energy. At the end of the lunch, as she was leaving, Lucas hugged her. "You can come back whenever you want," he said with his characteristic sincerity. "You're cool." Jenna knelt down to his level. "You're cool too, Lucas. Very cool." After that day, something shifted in Jenna. She started visiting more, participating more in her father's life, and accepting that maybe he had found something real with Daniela and Lucas. A year after the famous press conference, Michael knew what he wanted to do. It was a Saturday morning, and he was in his apartment, looking at a small blue velvet box he had just bought. Inside was a simple but beautiful ring with a discreet diamond. It wasn't the most expensive ring in the jewelry store, nor the flashiest, but it was the right one. It was Daniela. He proposed to her on a Sunday afternoon in the park, where he often took Lucas to play catch. There was no grand production, no rose petals or violinists, just the three of them, the sound of children playing around them, and Michael kneeling on the grass and asking if Daniela would spend the rest of her life with him. She said yes before he even finished the question, laughing and crying at the same time. Lucas jumped into their arms, shouting with joy, and the other people in the park applauded without even really knowing what was happening. The wedding was set for 6 months later, enough time for Francis, who was growing more frail, to be able to attend and enjoy it. They chose a simple, intimate ceremony in the same humble neighborhood church where Francis had been married decades before. The church was small, with time-worn wooden pews and simple stained glass, windows that let the sunlight stream in colorful rays. Only 50 people were invited, not important clients, not business partners, not the high society that had once scorned their relationship, just the people who truly mattered. Real friends, a few beloved employees who had become family, neighbors from Daniela's building who had always supported her, colleagues from her supermarket days. And Jenna. She was there, beautiful in a light blue dress, serving as one of the bridesmaids. Her reconciliation with her father hadn't been perfect. There were still difficult days, but she was there, and that meant the world to Michael. Lucas was the ring bearer, carrying the rings on a small white cushion, serious and focused as if it were the most important mission in the world. He wore a little suit Michael had bought for the occasion and was beaming with happiness. Frances, sitting in the front row, cried silent tears of joy. She was thinner, more frail, but her eyes shone as she watched her granddaughter walk down the aisle, beautiful in a simple but elegant white dress. The ceremony was short but emotional. Michael and Daniela exchanged vows they had written themselves, speaking of unexpected meetings, of love that blossoms when you least expect it, of the strength to face the world together. When the priest finally declared them husband and wife, and they kissed, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. But the biggest surprise came later, during the small reception they held in the hall next to the church. Michael asked for everyone's attention, and with Lucas by his side, he made an announcement. "Before we really start the celebration," he said, his voice echoing through the simple but lovingly decorated hall, "there's something I need to do." He knelt before Lucas, getting down to the boy's level. He took an envelope from his suit pocket and handed it to the child. "Lucas," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "from the day I met you, you changed my life. You taught me things I had forgotten, reminded me of what truly matters. And for the last 2 years I've had the privilege of being by your side, watching you grow, being a part of your life." Lucas held the envelope with both hands, his big eyes fixed on Michael. "Inside this envelope are some papers, adoption papers. If you'll have me, I would like to officially be your dad. I won't replace your biological father, because that's not possible and it's not fair, but I want to be your dad in every other way. I want to be at every school play, every soccer game, every important moment of your life. I want to help you with your homework, comfort you when you're sad, and cheer for you when you achieve something great." Tears started to fall down Michael's face. "So I'm asking you, Lucas, will you let me be your dad?" The silence in the hall was absolute. Everyone was waiting for the boy's answer. Lucas looked at the envelope, then at his mother, who was crying her eyes out, and finally back at Michael. "Does this mean we'll always be together?" he asked in his small voice. "Always," Michael promised. "Through everything. The good times and the bad, the happy and the sad, always." Lucas didn't say anything. He just threw himself into Michael's arms, hugging him with all the strength his small arms could muster. And in that hug was an answer clearer than any words could ever be. The hall erupted in applause and tears. Daniela joined the hug, and the three of them stood there. A new family officially formed, holding on to each other as if they would never let go. Jenna, watching all of this, felt something break inside her. All the anger she still held, all the resistance she maintained, dissolved in the face of that scene. She saw the father she had never truly known, the man who was willing to open his heart completely, to love without reservation. And she realized that she wanted to be a part of that family too. In the months following the wedding, the new Thompson family settled into a new routine. They moved into a house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing like the luxurious apartment Michael had owned on the Upper East Side. It was a 3-bedroom house with a small backyard where Lucas could play, a spacious kitchen where Daniela loved to cook, and a porch where Frances spent her afternoons in a rocking chair. Michael drastically reduced his workload. He hired an executive director to handle the day-to-day operations of the company and started working only 4 days a week, dedicating the other 3 to his family. He was there for breakfast, drove Lucas to school, helped with homework, and attended parent-teacher conferences. Daniela continued to work at Thompson Development, but now she ran an entire department of social responsibility. She created programs to help vulnerable families, offered scholarships to employees' children, and implemented daycare centers at the company's construction sites so working mothers could have their children nearby. Her work gained recognition, and she became an important voice in debates on social inclusion and opportunities for low-income individuals. Jenna started spending weekends at the new house, developing an affectionate relationship with Lucas, who adored her, and a respectful one with Daniela, who never tried to replace her mother, but always treated her with genuine kindness. The girl was finishing high school and planned to study psychology in college, inspired by Daniela's ability to understand and help people. Frances lived for 2 more years after the wedding, 2 blessed years in which she was surrounded by love and care. She saw her great-grandson grow up happy, saw her granddaughter fulfilled, and passed away peacefully one quiet Sunday morning, asleep in her rocking chair on the porch with a smile on her lips. It was a painful but gentle farewell, and the whole family honored her as she deserved, remembering her strength, her wisdom, and the unconditional love she had always given. 5 years after that chance encounter in the Park Slope Bakery, the Thompson family was gathered in their living room on a rainy Saturday afternoon. Lucas, now 12, had become a talkative and intelligent boy, passionate about science and dreaming of becoming an engineer like his dad. Jenna, now in college, visited whenever she could and had developed a strong bond with her stepbrother. Daniela was organizing old photos in an album when she came across a picture from Lucas's first birthday party that Michael had paid for, the one that changed everything. She called Michael over, and they both looked at the photo, at the little boy blowing out the candles with a huge smile on his face. "Sometimes I think," Daniela said thoughtfully, "that if I hadn't gone to that bakery that day, none of this would have happened. Our lives would have been completely different." Michael put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. "Fate would have found another way to bring us together," he said with conviction, "because some connections are inevitable, some people are meant to find each other." Lucas, who was reading a book on the sofa, looked up. "You guys are being mushy again," he complained, but he was smiling. "Get used to it," Daniela said, laughing and tossing a pillow at him. That night, after Lucas had gone to bed, Michael and Daniela stood on the porch watching the rain fall in the backyard. He held her hand, their fingers intertwined, and thought about everything that had changed since that Saturday when he walked into a bakery just to pick up an order. He had built many things in his life, towering buildings, a successful company, a considerable fortune, but none of it compared to what he had built with Daniela and Lucas, a real family, a real home, a real love. Their story, which began with curious glances and malicious gossip, had become a symbol of resilience and humanity in the city. Many people were inspired by them, by how they faced prejudice, by how they chose love over social conventions. Michael regularly received letters from people thanking him for giving a voice to relationships that society still judged, for showing that love knows no social class or economic differences. But, to him, none of that mattered as much as the simple moments. The Sunday mornings making pancakes with Lucas, the deep conversations with Jenna about life and the future, Daniela's hugs at the end of the day, the sound of laughter filling the house, the feeling of belonging, of having a place in the world, of being loved and loving without reservation. "What are you thinking about?" Daniela asked, noticing his distant gaze. "About how lucky I am," Michael replied, turning to look at her. "About how a chance moment, an impulsive decision to help someone, changed my entire life. About how you and Lucas saved me from an empty life I didn't even realize I was living." Daniela smiled, that beautiful smile that still made his heart race. "We were lucky too, to find you, to gain a bigger family, to get a chance to start over." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms on the porch, listening to the sound of the rain and feeling the peace of someone who has finally found their place in the world. It didn't matter where they came from or how different their backgrounds were. What mattered was the present they had built together and the future they would continue to build, day by day, choice by choice. In the end, true wealth wasn't in the assets accumulated or the social status achieved. It was in the deep human connections, in the love built with patience and dedication, in the daily choice to see another person with empathy and compassion. It was in the courage to love without fear of judgment, to be true to oneself even when the world demanded falsehood, to choose the heart over convenience. It had all started with a cancelled cake, a child's sad eyes, and a simple gesture from a man who decided in that moment to remember where he came from and who he really was. And that transformative act had created ripples that changed not just 3 lives, but touched countless others who heard their story and were inspired to make their own courageous choices. Years later, when Lucas grew up and had children of his own, he would tell the story of how his parents met, and he would pass on the most important lesson he learned, that genuine kindness has the power to transform entire lives, that true love overcomes any barrier, and that sometimes the most casual encounters are the most meaningful of all. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside that house there was only warmth, love, and the certainty that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, as a family, as it was meant to be.